Hello everyone, Caroline here. Today I want to share 3 card ideas with a stamp set from Action and a BoBunny paper pad. So this stamp set has 5 different butterflies and 1 sentiment. And the butterflies are all in different sizes and different designs. And then the paper pad from BoBunny is the early bird collection, and it's a very springtime, soft colors designs. And I bought this a while back in Tuesday morning. Now you can choose any stamp set or paper pad you have on hand. Go and shop your stash. And here I'm just showing you the different designs so you get an idea. Let's get started with my first card idea, and for that I want to create 3D butterflies. So, to create my butterflies, I'm picking up some random pieces of watercolor paper and a vellum sheet. And I also have all the other elements for my card ready. So I cut out two ovals from a die I have in my stash. It's scalloped edge and then a regular oval. And I picked out 3 ink colors that work well with my paper pad. So I chose this fossilized amber oxide, then broken china oxide, and then for my die stress posy, which is a very nice pink color. And then I'm just using my piece of watercolor paper and smush this into my ink. I just want to create a random background piece that I can use to create my base layer of my butterflies. So when I'm happy with the way it looks, I'm just sprinkle a little bit more water on it, and I pick up the water, so I'm getting kind of this model effect. And then while this is drying, I'm taking my piece of vellum paper and I give this a good scrub with my powder tool. And then I'm lay out all my butterflies. And then I'm using an embossing ink, and I'm using the one from Ranger that has the gray tint in it. That makes it very easy to see if I have a good impression. Because for this, for the top layer, I really want a nice impression of my butterflies. And I'm using my Misty here, and I'm having like a little rag tool, that I'm using to press down. And then emboss this with gold embossing powder. And then I heat this with my heat tool on, and it looks very nice. I got a really good impression. Now I'm cutting out those butterflies, and I'm careful. I want to keep the antennas of the butterflies intact for my top layer. And once I have them all cut out and my background pieces are dry, I'm gonna stamp my butterflies on this background piece, and I'm using again this gray embossing ink. And I'm going a couple of times so I get again a good impression on that watercolor paper on top of the ink. And I will emboss this again with gold embossing powder. And then I'm going to heat this up and I will cut this out again, fussy cut my butterflies out. And now for my base layer, I'm cut away the antennas. I don't want to have double antennas for my butterflies. So I just have the butterflies, and I'm cutting very, very close to my embossing. I don't want an outline there. And that looks very pretty with those different colors on my background. Now to assemble my butterflies, I'm just gluing. I put a little bit of liquid glue on my base layer, only in the middle, and then lay my matching vellum on top and glue this together. And I'm making a total here of 6 butterflies. That gives me 2 cards. So for my first card, I'm using the sentiment on that white oval, and I emboss this with gold also. And then I lift this up with foam tape from my other oval piece here, that scalloped edge. And that's gonna be my sentiment for this card. For my background, I'm using this pattern paper with the little butterflies on it, and I'm die cutting this with a frame die, a stitched frame die. And then I'm using the stripe paper, and I rip a little horizontal stripe that I will glue on top of it. And you will see the finished card in a moment, because I want to show you the other card as well. So I'm just gluing this strip of paper on top. I'm inking up the edge and then attach my oval and the butterflies on top. And for my second card, you will see how I assemble that. Here I used a round scalloped edge circle and a white circle, and I chose this little this pattern paper that has the little flowers on it on pink, and that pattern paper that had this hand script on it. And I'm using my ruler here, and I'm ripping up a vertical line this time. I'm inking up the edge of my pattern paper piece first and attach it to my card base. And then I am attaching my vertical strip here on top. I just want to give it a little bit of contrast there. And then I am cutting away the top and the bottom, and I assemble my little sentiment here. I also used the same sentiment and embossed it in gold. And then I attach this with foam tape, the circle in the middle of the card. And then I'm arranging this big butterfly on the top, and I'm just gluing this onto my circle. And on the top of the butterfly, I'm using little foam 3D dots to keep the butterfly in place. And then on the bottom, I have those 2 little butterflies, and I'm gluing them kind of on top of each other in an angle. And I'm gluing them on the bottom left side of my card. And again, I'm using those dots to keep them in place. And it looks so pretty with the vellum on top. It has this cool 3D effect. I just love this. And then for embellishing the card a little bit more, I'm using Nuvo drops. I'm using like this blue Euro drops, and then like a nice light rosé ones. And then here is the finished card. And here is the first card again. And you can see how nicely those butterflies stand off stand up of this card. Okay, for card number 2, I wanted to do something mixed media, but I wanted to do an easy background. So here we go. I used a piece of watercolor paper. I chose 3 different inks, and you can use any dye ink you have, any color combination you like, but maybe stay in the same color family. And then I'm adding a little bit of fossilized amber and gold glaze. So, and to start out for my first layer, I'm just smooshing again the ink onto my craft mat here and give it a spritz of water and just picking up the ink with my watercolor paper. And kind of, before I do it, I kind of think where I want my color to be. So I'm starting like in a corner. I want it to be like pink, and you can always use your spritz, your water, spritz water on the paper to move the color further around. I like how that runs down my paper. So here's like, okay, I'm picking up a little bit more, and I think, okay, I want the other one, the yellow in the middle, and then I want a little bit more purple on the left side. So I'm picking up the color until I'm okay with my design here. And then I'm gonna dry this. And at this point, I don't want this to be too dark. I just wanted a good layer of color. And then for a little bit more color around the edges, I thought I'm giving it a little bit more yellow and also this darker color on the side. I just wanted to have a little more dark purple. Then I'm drying this. And now comes the fun part. So all you need for this kind of technique, you have to have a little piece of or 2 pieces of bubble wrap. And I'm just again smoosh my ink on my craft sheet here. And then I'm picking up and also a little bit of gold glaze. And if you don't have gold glaze, you can just use, you know, another ink, or you can mix up some modeling paste with color or whatever you have on hand. So what I'm doing is I'm picking up with this bubble wrap the color, and I smoosh it very lightly onto my paper randomly. And I do the same with the darker one. And this gives this great texture. Now I'm drying this. And then I'm picking up this glaze and smoosh this also. And since this glaze is a little bit thicker, it gives me a little texture, like not an even texture, like more like a randomly texture. So while this is drying, I cut out a tag with a die that I have in black, with black cardboard, and I'm choosing the sentiment from the stamp set and the smallest butterfly, and I'm gonna take my piece here just to see where I want to lay my tag. So I'm putting it at an angle, so when I put my sentiment, I want it to be straight when you literally read the card. And I'm using again my gray embossing ink here, and it's so nice how you can see the ink, and you know that you have a good impression there. And then I'm using white embossing powder and emboss this. And then for final splatters, I'm using my white Distress spray stain in Picket Fence, and I just put a few random splatters on the background and on the tag. Then I'm using my archival distress ink, and I'm using first a vintage photo, and I'm just ink the edge, and then I'm using my tag and I place it kind of where I want to place it, and then I'm using my acrylic block and one of the butterflies and stamp them in black onto my background. And I do that with the other butterflies as well, and it's very handy that we have that the stamp set has different butterflies. So I'm trying to use all of them. And I'm creating kind of a random pattern on the background. So then I am using a little bit of pink jute twine, and I'm attached this to my tag and on the back of my background here. And then I'm attaching the tag with foam tape to my background, and attach my background with some glue tape onto my card base. And I chose like a craft paper here. It's an 5x7 card. And then I'm attaching my background. And cut away that little thing from the tag. And then I'm just use those little pieces that I cut off and unravel them and create kind of a little bow, if you will, and then attach this to the top of the tag so it looks like a little bow. And cut off the left over there, and I'm using also for embellishment and some more texture black and white Nuvo drops and a few dots of gold stickers. And here is the finished card. So for card number 3, I decided I want to do a little bit of no line watercolor with my butterflies, and I choose those 2 papers there, and I want to match the color of the butterflies, those papers, so like a yellow bluish color. I'm using a piece of watercolor paper, and this is a cold pressed watercolor paper, and it's actually from the Archer. Yeah, the Archer brand. And I'm stamping it a couple of times, and I'm using the Simon Says stamp Burly Beige color. And you can see how this is you can barely see the stamps, which is exactly what I want. And then to do my watercoloring, I'm just using a small brush, and this is a small dagger brush. And I'm filling all 4 parts of the wings with water, and I'm leaving a little opening between the top and the bottom wing, and also in the middle where the body is. And then I am dropping in my color. I am using for my first butterfly, this is Cobalt Blue Deep, and I'm just mixing this with a little bit of ultramarine and I'm literally dropping at the edge of the body. I'm dropping in this color, and since my paper is wet, it runs right into the wings. So it's a wet and wet technique. And then when I have this in place, I'm wetting the edges a little bit with water and add some Indian yellow. That's a very sunny yellow, and I put that on the edge, on the outer edge of the butterfly, and that runs then right into the blue and blends nicely. Now I have to say, if you've never done this, it takes a little bit of practice to get the amount of water right and the amount of color. So if you attempt this, it might be a good idea to try it first on some sketch paper and practice a little bit before you do your final card. Here you can see how I am dropped in the yellow, and now I'm going ahead and picking up some where I think it's too wet, and I'm picking up the water with a dry brush. Then I'm going again into the middle. I'm adding more blue, and I also put some random dots of blue around the outer edge. And then I'm using my fine tip of the dagger, and I'm flicking motions. I'm dispersing the blue. Then I'm using a little bit a mix of Payne's gray and neutral tint, which gives it like a grayish, dark grayish. And I'm going and making a few dots, and I'm outlining my butterfly. And then I'm adding some water to blend this. And then I'm adding another layer of blue to give it more color there, contrast. And then I'm going to a very teeny, it's a number zero round brush, and I'm using again a concentrated mix of Payne's gray and neutral tint, and I'm drawing in my body. And since the paper is still wet, it's kind of like mixing with the blue and gives this nice watercolor effect for my butterfly body. And once I'm satisfied, I just stop here and let it dry and move on to my other butterfly. For the little butterfly in the middle, I chose a combination of Indian yellow for the inside and sap green for the outside of the wings. And for the top butterfly, I'm doing the opposite. I'm going in with the sap green in the middle, and then using the Indian yellow for my outside of the wings. And by the way, you can use any watercolor medium that you have on hand. I'm just using my traditional watercolors, but you can use anything you have, if it's pencil or markers or liquid watercolor. So anything you have on hand you can use for this technique. So once I'm done, I'm outside with the outside of the wings, I'm adding a little bit of red into my green that gives a little darker olive green, and I'm contouring and I'm adding more contrast. And then I'm going in again with the smaller brush and filling in the body with Payne's gray and neutral tint. Now I'm letting this dry for a moment, and then I'm choosing a very teeny tiny, that's a 00 round brush pen, and a very concentrated mix of Payne's Gray, and I'm flicking in or drawing in the antennas of the butterflies. And then for a little bit more texture, I am fine splattering in Indian yellow, a little bit of green, and also some gold watercolor for a little bit of sparkle. And I'm using a smaller brush for this. Then for my sentiment, I decided to stamp this right inside my card. And then I am assembling my card. I'm using this blue pattern paper for my background. And then I'm gluing, cut out the watercolor piece, and I'm gluing that onto this yellow pattern paper. And I think those colors go very nicely together. And then I'm lifting this up with some foam tape. And for my final touch, I am using some Nuvo drops in Gold Coast. And here is the finished card. Okay, and here are again all cards that I made. I hope you found this video inspiring. And go ahead and shop your stash. Find a stamp that you have never used. I mean, how many butterfly stamps do we have in our stash? I have plenty. And so go ahead, find a stamp set you haven't used before and try some new things. I hope I see you in my next video. And let me know if you have questions or comments. I'm happy to answer questions. So that's it for now, and I see you in my next video. Until then, bye.